Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with another market recap, this time for February 25th. It is a Monday. We kind of got a nice little gap on the open, as maybe buyers were a little too excited. We ran right into resistance on the S&P, on a lot of things, actually, most noticeably the S&P. Lots of things gapped kind of right into resistance, and it was just not going to be one of those days where we were going to get a lot of running. And so we really saw, not substantial, but we did sell off of our opening highs today pretty much across the board. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello, Patricia. Great to see you guys as always. I hope you all had a great weekend. We're about through February. It's crazy how time flies, right? But such is the way of things. I hope everybody had a great day both in and out of the market. As we take a look ahead to earnings, fairly light week. There are some retails. You got Macy's, Home Depot's, Nordstrom's. So there are some companies reporting earnings. Tonight, you had just a couple of S&P companies. Oak was one of them, MOS the other. And then tomorrow before the open, AutoZone, Home Depot, Macy's, the J.M. Smucker company. So got a few companies that might be interesting tomorrow on the opening bell to see what happens with their earnings. But not a heavy earnings week, but it's still here. And hey, Blake, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. As we look at the price action here today, here's our open. Trade deal pushed back. We bought some time. A little bit of optimism there. Gap up on the open. Kind of hung out for about an hour before making one attempt, and it was not very wholehearted attempt. So, and then really spent much the rest of the day just kind of drifting to the downside. Ultimately, pretty much filling up that gap off of the open. Not particularly bearish, but definitely not bullish, at least on today's price action. As you look at it on a daily time frame, I think it makes a lot of sense. Gapping right into resistance. We don't know, and I've said it many times, I don't know if we should call it 28 or 28.20 or anywhere in between. Well, it ran right up to that line and did me a favor. So at least today, ran right into that resistance zone. That is where we kissed, and that pushed us down. Now, that makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about that pretty much since we broke out back here, right? We've been talking about on and off for a long time. That was really our next real level of resistance, or at least that zone. And hey, Andy, good to see you, my friend. So no terrible surprise. I don't think that it was going to take a little bit more. I mean, you never know the future, but, I never expect anything to break through unchallenged. And so I'm not surprised that we did see a little bit of selling there. Now, really, the question here is, where do we go from this point in time as we work through this week? I guess we'll find out. There's really not a lot of sell signals, but, at least in my opinion, that is a pretty important level of resistance. And so, that matters to me quite a bit. Pullback would probably be the best, from a technical point of view, I think at least, but we'll see if that's what we're getting. All the other signs, we are still, above pretty much all of our short-term moving averages, anything on hourly timeframes and whatnot. So we're not really seeing any sell signals. We're just selling at resistance, which, again, I think that makes sense. At least in my brain, it makes sense. Obviously, keep an eye on that. We'll be talking about that until we're no longer talking about that one, right? That's a resistance level that going to be keeping an eye out for. Wouldn't fault anybody for taking profits, scaling out, hedging a little bit, whatever your methodology is at that resistance level. I wouldn't fault anybody for protecting some of these bullish gains personally. Over in the NASDAQ, didn't quite make it to that resistance level, but definitely kind of got caught up in kind of the theme of the day. Gap on the open, sell off throughout the rest of the day. Nothing substantial necessarily, but kind of that slow but steady decline on the intraday chart. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that 7,200 area. That continues to be the resistance zone. In my opinion, still like this area. Going to like it a lot more. And this is kind of how the market's going to be. We're so close. We talked about it on Friday, and we kind of got it today. We're so close to resistance. We're still bullish. I'm going to feel a lot better if and when we break those levels of resistance, at least from a bullish point of view. So really just kind of matching the tone of the S&P. And that really is the theme of the day for the most part. Over in the Dow, same thing. Ran right up into that high, just like the S&P. We didn't know if we should call it this or this or this. Well, we took that one out, last week, right? And so this was kind of the last level of resistance, standing, if you will, running right into it, kissing it on the intraday, much like everything else, selling off, putting in another little bit of a bearish looking candlestick, but everything else still higher highs, higher lows, still above those short-term moving averages, not really generating sell signals. I do anticipate a pullback, or maybe better way to put it is I'm mentally prepared for a pullback going into, or a little bit of a consolidation. I would definitely like to see that be the way that the market played out. We'll see if we get it. And of course, the Russell, not to be outdone, runs right up into 16, actually broke 16, I think hit 1602 as its high point. But just like everything else, sold off of that closing, a little bit on the downward side of things. If you look at the body of that candle, another gravestone doji looking type of candle. So, I mean, really today and until really it's not a thing anymore, probably for me, it's these resistance levels. It's been, and I don't see any reason to be bearish from a technical point of view, but I will absolutely respect these major levels of resistance, or at least what I think are major levels of resistance, until we figured out one way or the other. So we are definitely going to have to challenge some pretty heavy overhead this week. This market's been strong. I absolutely believe that it can win this fight, but it needs to before I'm willing to go really any further, at least across the board. Individual components, yeah, I'm okay. In what I believe is a stock picker's market. Doesn't mean I wouldn't take any bullish trades until resistance is broken, but broadly speaking, I wouldn't personally do that until that level of resistance is broken. And I think this is a great place to take some profits, personally at least. We'll see where it takes us. So really everything kind of looking the same. We held up fairly well over in the material sector here today, still dealing with resistance over here as well, that 200 period moving average. I think you could argue that we closed a wee bit above resistance, closing right at that moving average. I don't know how strong of a signal this is. I don't think it's a very clear break. Whenever you can argue it, if you will, it means you need some more upward movement, in my opinion. So, but we did hold up a little bit better over in the material sector today than some of the other areas within the market, for whatever that's worth. Again, I'm not sold. You guys know me. You've got to sell me. And I'm not sold off of this candle, but I do still like this area from a bullish point of view. I will really like that break if we actually get it, which could be as early as tomorrow. But again, we might need the market to break to help us, at least across the board. I'm going to be very interested in seeing which of these sectors, like materials and the industrials who ran into resistance today, do at resistance if the market does have a little bit of a pullback. And that should be an interesting one to watch. Over in energy, started to see a little bit of movement back into it. Most importantly, we're still holding this kind of 65 that we watched for a long time together. And that really is the big one for me. Personally, we did see crude sell a little bit here today. That probably didn't help out the energy sector, but holding 65. And for me, as long as we're holding 65, I will continue to look at it from a bullish point of view. Holding it for another day. Is it ready to, to kind of jump and get going? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it wants to, but it is continuing to hold that breakout. And as we talked when I was scared of it as a bull, now I'm respecting it as a bull. So I think that 65 continues to be the number to be keeping an eye on over here in the energy sector. Personally, financials, weird day. Much like the market. They had the gap and then really just kind of sold off, like, pretty much everything did. That's not that weird. Ran right into that 200 period moving average. And unlike, some of the other areas, I mean, it was a big kind of whoop and I don't know, whoop and flip, I guess that's what I'll call it. Gap on the open really got going. Look at, wow, financials are going to have a day. We top out and then just as quickly as that gave it all back. So definitely some interesting price action over in financials here today. A lot of movement, didn't really go anywhere, off of, kind of got to the back to where we opened on the day, but definitely a little bit of a wild ride in the financial sector after kissing that 200-day moving average, still closing above, still showing bullish signals for the most part. Above that 200 is going to be, in my mind, a pretty solid signal. We've got that first failure, and maybe that's the only failure, right? One way or the other. Maybe we get pushed down from here. Maybe we break it as early as tomorrow. But that first run in with the 200-day moving average definitely was a profit-taking zone. With today's price action, I think that's the most logical explanation to what happened here today. Beyond that 200, we do have some room towards the upside still. So overall, we are continuing just like the market. We haven't done anything wrong in my mind, on any day or any swing trading type of time frame that I use. But interesting price action and the failure at that 200. That first one we lost that first one. Industrial is going to be an interesting week. We all know how strong it's been. It's, for all of us here, all of us in the different shows, people I've been talking to, all, Team Tackle, basically, we've really enjoyed the industrial sector as of late. And finally running into resistance for the first time in a little bit. We are actually running into a price that, we've seen a lot of history here at that 77. We've been talking about it as soon as we broke out of this level of resistance. Going to be an interesting fight. We lost today. A lot of reason to take profits. This has been a fantastic run to the upside. And so I'm not going to fault anybody for taking profits at that resistance level, especially with the market at resistance simultaneously. A pullback would be awesome in the industrial sector. I would absolutely love to see that. I'm still not going to hold my breath that we're going to see that because it's not really given us many pullbacks as of late. But I do think we really do need to keep an eye on that 77. We do have a lot of price history there. Some of these things are fairly extended to the upside and, maybe could use a good, little, or at least a little bit of a pullback. Doesn't mean they'll get one. Doesn't mean that they have to get one by any means. But at resistance, that would make sense. Should be interesting to see. I'm very interested if we see a pullback in the market and if we're able to see some of these stronger sectors still break these levels of resistance without the market breaking. Sometimes that can be easier said than done. Another day in the industrial sector. This time, though, a little bit of profit taking off of that open. Tech doesn't want to be left out. Very nice open. Definitely gapped up strong off of a really nice day on Friday. Almost working into resistance, much like the NASDAQ came just below that $72 mark here and pretty much caught up with the rest of the day of selling. I don't really think this is telling us anything that any of these other areas aren't. It's, again, we're at resistance and we're all a little nervous. It's a lot easier to buy when there's room until resistance, right? When we saw industrials break out a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have to worry about resistance. Now we do. Right? We're seeing that pretty much across the board. And I think that's why that resistance is going to be such an important thing to be keeping an eye on throughout the course of the week. Beyond 72, definitely room to run, in my opinion. I do expect it to, kind of go with the NASDAQ, maybe lead it a little bit. It's been doing that a little bit as of late, but probably going to need a little bit of movement in the market, particularly the NASDAQ, to take a good solid run at 72, I think. Over in staples, not a great looking day. Today's kind of an ugly candle. Now, we've talked a lot about 55. You guys know me. That's been the number that has been kind of keeping me on the fence, if you will. And of course, today's price action does nothing to make me change my stance on that. That old support level, what has now turned into a fairly, significant level of short-term resistance just over the last couple of weeks. I think from a bullish point of view, you really want to see that break. That's what I've wanted to see. And every day that we aren't able to do it, I need to see it that much more personally. That's a pretty developing into a pretty respectable level of resistance. Not seeing a ton of bear signals yet, but I will note that we did close below the 9 EMA. And that 9 EMA, which has been going up, basically since we kind of reversed, is starting to flatten out to maybe swing to the downside. Now, again, it's just one thing. You guys know me. I'm always kind of, one thing step by step, right? And that's my philosophy. But we didn't see this in a lot of other areas. But we certainly saw a little bit of at least short-term relative weakness in the staples, failing at resistance, closing below the 9 EMA, which is flipping around a little bit. Is that enough to completely go bearish in the sector? Well, I guess that's up to you. To me, it's not. But am I very open to bearish trades within the sector? I personally absolutely am. They are showing a little bit of relative weakness, and as long as that resistance holds, I'm probably going to feel that way. A break of that resistance will definitely change my tune. As we've talked before, I will look at that as a very nice bullish signal, but until it happens, I'm going to assume it's going to be difficult. And quite a bit of negative price action here today within this sector as a whole. It's just not been a particularly fantastic sector as of late. I've not been shy about always liking something better. And so over in utilities, to no one's surprise here at least, we saw some profit taking. And we've been enjoying the utility sector since its recent break. Some of you sooner than that. I know some of you may have been jumping in as early as here. I thought this was the better signal. And of course, I'm a little bit on the conservative or wimpy side. Depends on how mean you want to be to me. But we filled up that space. As we talked about before, 57 has been the high point on this ETF. Only thing we know for certain is the last times we've tested it, we failed miserably and saw quite a bit of selling. Now, do I expect that to happen? No, I don't. But I do expect it to be a little bit of a fight. We did see some profit taking, and really, while the S&P, I get it. On XLU here, I really get it. That was the only price history we have at 57 is selling. And so I think that the right responsible thing to do was take profits at 57 on the utility sector. Let's keep an eye on 57. We might consolidate. We might break it tomorrow. Maybe we need a little bit of a pullback. Overall, we're still seeing good things. Again, for me at least, just because I'm not bullish doesn't mean I'm bearish, right? It just means this is for me, this resistance is a big deal. Anytime we're dealing with all-time highs, I'm going to treat them with quite a bit of respect, whether it works out that I should or shouldn't. But definitely some profit taking today. Today, 57 caused trouble. Will it happen again tomorrow? We'll have to see. But today, definitely had some profit taking in the utility sector. And I personally completely understand that. Not a lot has changed over in the healthcare sector. In my opinion, for the most part, we continue. And I do believe we can look at this low that we put in last week as our new swing low. That is how I will be looking at it at least. Whereas I needed some upward movement. While we have a red candle today because of the way that we opened and sold throughout the course of the day, it is still upward movement on the chart as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to personally be moving up my swing level of support, if you will, down to 91. And as long as that holds, I will continue to be looking at this from a bullish point of view. If that falters, that sentence will change. I will at least not be bullish. Right now, I think that as long as we hold this, we can continue to look at this through bullish eyes. I think while today not really a great day, I do think the movement in regards specifically to the healthcare sector here was important. That gives me the idea that, yeah, we saw buyers come off of this price. We're willing to spend their money at this price. We've seen upward movement off of this price. So I continue to personally like this area. As we know, we've got a little bit in this 93, 93.50 range as far as resistance goes. And beyond that, not a lot till 96. It does continue to be an appealing area from a bullish point of view, in my opinion. And nothing that happened here today. Would have loved to see it be able to hold up a little bit, but I mean, this was the type of day, and the market gaps right into resistance. It's the first decision I have to make on a Monday morning, and it's not even football season. So I have to, first decision, market's at resistance. What do I do? That's a heck of a way to start Monday morning. So over in discretionary, they personify that. They basically gapped right into that old high on the ETF this morning. And again, it just wasn't going to happen today. We didn't necessarily know it this morning, but now we do. Sold off of that pretty significantly. Again, nothing dramatic, but we pretty much, when you see a big, when it's basically a big red bar, that means kind of sellers were there pretty much throughout most of the day, and they were in charge. Fail today makes sense. Beyond that, I do like this area. Now we have Home Depot coming out with earnings here tomorrow. We have Lowe's a little bit later in the week. So there are some earnings that might be able to impact this sector as early as tomorrow. So it should be interesting to see. Beyond that 112, I like this area. This is one of those areas that, to me, that break, there's not a lot in the way. A lot of these charts Some of them don't look great. I will completely admit that, but some of them look nice. You know, Home Depot without earnings, I probably like Home Depot from a bullish point of view. I don't do the earnings thing unless it's earnings specific, but Starbucks been doing very nicely. So I really do like a break of 112 if I am able to get it. We did not win today though. We definitely gapped right into that resistance, and it just wasn't going to happen. And again, to me that makes sense. I'm always surprised when we win that fight. So I'm not surprised that we lost that fight here today. Over in real estate, first time in a while we actually kind of saw a real bearish candle. And we have to be pretty nitpicky when it comes to the real estate sector these days because it's been on such a tear. And even as of late, it's just been kind of that slow drift to the upside. Definitely saw some profit taking, at least that's what I believe it was here today within this sector. And unlike so many days over the last few weeks, buyers didn't just jump in cuts. And again, I don't blame them. I don't think that's the way to trade, but that's really how they've been dealing with this sector as of late. It gives them any reason, and they're jumping back in. Little bit of a different feel today with today's candle. Now, with that said, I would certainly not be bearish on this chart, but maybe we can get a pullback, and I do think that would be very healthy for this sector. Personally, it is REITs, and so they're not the world's generally the world's favorite swing trading instrument, but I still think a pullback would be healthy. I'd like the opportunity to make that call for myself at least. But if we kind of think about where we're at, we're still kind of hanging around that same old resistance level. Let's go to weekly chart period here. Still holding right above that old breakout point from days gone by. But maybe there's a little bit of a pullback coming here. Again, it's just one day in the world of real estate these days. That's all we get, right? At least that's all we've been getting. Definitely seems to maybe feel a little bit different. Maybe people are willing to take some profits and have a little bit of a pullback over here into, say, 34.50 into these shorter term moving averages. Closing right at that 9 exponential moving average today for those interested, kind of closed right there. I think it was actually on the number at 34.79. So I don't think it closed above or below. It closed at today. And over in communication services, another bland day over there as it continues to have a hard time gaining a lot of traction. Again, we've talked many times before, and we'll say it real quick. Without Facebook moving, Google moving, it's hard for this to really get cooking one way or the other. Gaming stocks, not necessarily all that fantastic right now. Certainly didn't have a great day here today. Not a terrible day, but not a great day. We're kind of in this range. And for me, that is where I placed the communication services sector is in this range, below 45 a sell, above 47 a buy, and everything in between. I'm just waiting for one side to win. And that may change, but for me, for right now, that is the way I'm going to be looking at it. A clean break of 47, I do think is a very interesting bullish signal. A break of 45, I absolutely think would be a tradable bearish signal, and who knows exactly what it would look like. So maybe it would be nice, maybe it would just be a signal. But for me right now, we're stuck in the middle, and you have been placed on timeout communication services sector until you figure yourself out one way or the other, at least directionally speaking. So there's our day in the stock market. Really the moral of the story, we gap into resistance. Resistance is tough to break. These are some levels. These are some major levels, right? These are high points, big round numbers. People have been keeping an eye on 28 on the S&P, 16 on the Russell. So, these were going to be significant tests. And so to me, makes perfect sense that, profit taking occurred, gapping into them on a Monday morning. Don't think we've seen any sell signals generate across the board or anything like that. But I do think we should be treating that level of resistance with respect. Hopefully tomorrow, because I'm sure many of us are probably more skewed to the bull side than the bear side right now. I would imagine, just guessing. I wouldn't mind being wrong. I wouldn't mind just breaking right through those levels of resistance tomorrow, but I will be treating them as if they're going to be difficult to break through until proven wrong or right, one way or the other. So as we look at the VIX, a little bit of spiking coming in today, nothing to see here really. But we did see a little bit of selling in the market. So, of course, the VIX, good chance it's going to move up just a little bit. Over in the dollar, continues to pull back. We continue to kind of go back and forth. We're starting to develop a little bit of a floor. Like I said last week, I would understand, I don't think it's there right now personally, but I think a lot of people would agree with that. If the signals generate from a pullback point of view, I would understand bullish, looking at it from a bullish pullback perspective. I don't think they've generated today or as of right now. Personally, for me, though, I'm not really interested. I am far more interested in other things, and I'm going to continue to treat this like it is in a trading range until something changes or it's not in that trading range anymore. So keep an eye on this little floor that's developed. If this floor, which is kind of right around our moving averages, if this does give out, there probably should be a little bit of room to continue to sell. I don't think that would be a bearish signal, but I really have put these guys for some time now, as you guys know, into overall they are neutral, and that will continue to be the way that I will treat them until we come out of that trading range. Over in the metals market, started to see a little bit of movement over in gold today, coming off of that old resistance level. We saw some buyers step in on Friday. Not particularly great candle, but holding our support level nonetheless. Overall, this continues to be a pretty nice looking chart. Much like most people, I continue to like gold and continue to look at it through bullish eyes. And so I don't think anything that happened today here is going to change that opinion whatsoever. As long as we're holding, 13 again right now, really everything is just your rules, how you like to handle things, how I like to handle things. As long as we're above 13, for me at least right now, I will continue to be very boring on gold. Some days we'll break or have a really nice candle, but most of the time, yeah, I'm bullish. Just apply your rules. So not particularly anything to change there. Silver, on the other hand, I still overall like silver, but I do think, as I've said many times before, the break is going to be a much better signal than trying to work here in this middle-y rangey stuff that they've got going on. Now, probably if gold continues to move, probably going to see silver do the same thing. But again, for me, this is a much better breakout play as opposed to gold. I saw Matt say on the halftime report, or was it Mark? Somebody said they don't even look at the chart to buy gold anymore. And while that's taking it a little extreme, I wouldn't go that far. I'm sure they were joking. I get where they were coming from. It does make sense. Whereas on silver, I think you really want to see that break to see, that next wave of movement. At least that's how I am. Boring when it comes to this stuff, right? Usually I have the same opinion today that I did yesterday. I'm not very exciting. So that means things are behaving. Now, natural gas. Hey, natural gas, you actually did something today. I wouldn't fault somebody, and I certainly wouldn't have faulted them earlier in the day for trading natural gas. If we look at our open, I'm just going to come into an hourly time frame. We saw that range. I would have liked to see it stick in that range a little bit longer, but natural gas, it never does what I'd like it to do, right? At least when I'm asking it to do nothing. You can kind of see, here's our gap, on the open here yesterday, really went sideways, basically all through the night into today's trading day before finally breaking to the upside and seeing quite a bit of price movement off of that. This is a interesting chart, and I really think you can actually start to have not for an entry tomorrow. I think with the price action that we saw today, it makes an entry tomorrow very difficult, simply because we are not too far away from resistance, at least from a swing perspective. I think we probably should assume that this old support can turn into new resistance, especially, coming out of a downward trend. But for the first time in a while, we can actually, I think, make a bullish case from a technical point of view on natural gas. We had a little bit of a double bottom. We now, by virtue of today's price action, broke out. We broke resistance. So we, held support, made a higher high. We closed above, short-term moving averages, both, for me, the 9 EMA and the 20 simple moving average. You're seeing the 9 cross over the 20 and kind of it's been flattening out, starting to creep to the upward side. Of course, we're not quite there, but we know that 2.5 is a, particularly, at least respectably strong level of support. Going back in time, looking at our weekly chart, we've been at this general ballpark and seen nice movement off of it for quite some time now. So while we didn't necessarily hit the number, we certainly have worked into the area, in my opinion, at least. I think you could make a bullish case for it. Now, it's a little bit aggressive. I don't think, I'm not the type of person who's going to jump in the first chance you get. And we will want to keep an eye on every level of resistance along the way. And we will do that, of course, here together, however far it decides to go. But I do think for the first time, you could at least make a case. If someone said, Frank, I'm buying natural gas, doing a covered call on UNG, selling naked puts on UNG to cash flow, I really couldn't come up with a great argument other than I'm a wimp. Other than, I get it, just a little too early for me. I'm not quite there yet. But I really couldn't come up with a strong technical argument against it. I could argue, well, wait until it pulls back on the intraday or whatever. And I probably would, but I couldn't make a strong case from a technical point of view. Our first level of resistance that I expect should be a challenge is going to be 2.9 here, and I do think that's something worth watching. And this will be one of those, whatever kind of run it may or may not have. There's going to be layers. There's going to be we'll test 2.9. Then we're going to be working into 3, which is a nice round number, which is also going to line up pretty close with the 50-day moving average. And hypothetically, we would win that. We're going to have to deal with that flat 200. Not a huge deal, but it can be a deal. We've seen it happen, right? We've seen it not matter, and we've seen it matter. So we'll have work up into our gapping point right here. So this should be an interesting one. I'm going to take it one step at a time. I do see that as a potentially at least a bullish signals for the first time in quite some time here in natural gas. And as long as we hold this recent breakout point from basically last week into today, I could understand the argument. I guess that's how I will put it. I'm a little wimpier. I don't feel like you need to move in the first chance that you get. That's just my style and philosophy. So not everyone agrees with that, but I think you have to like it from a bullish point of view, at least potentially short term, and lots of resistance along the way, though. On the other side of the energy line, we have our crude oil, which we've really been fighting that same level of intraday resistance here today. Trump comes out and talks. I don't know if that means anything or not. I always assume it doesn't because I don't think like that. But we did break, a little bit. Now, we've watched it fight with that level of resistance. We saw it throughout last week, right? Ultimately, breaking some intraday support here today. The reasons why we can argue them, but I just kind of go with the price action personally. I don't like to put a whole lot of whys behind short-term price movement personally. So we did break down on the intraday and quite a bit of selling, even taking out a 200 hourly moving average, which is not a deal breaker, but a little bit of a bearish signal, in my opinion, in the short term. Now, from a broader perspective, we are still making higher highs and higher lows. We weren't able to take out resistance. We didn't run basically all the way to $58, but I don't think we've really done anything technically wrong here today, other than on the intraday. I do think we have some intraday sell signals in crude, which leads me to believe that I at least need one more day before this is a potential pullback opportunity, if that's what I'm interested in doing. Certainly a pretty bearish looking candle. There's really no two ways about that. But really continuing to make higher highs and higher lows, I'm not going to be afraid of a pullback opportunity if it lines up the right way. Don't think that can happen tomorrow. If it's just a big green day tomorrow, it'll have to do it without me. Unless it broke out, then we could talk, but too close to 59, so we wouldn't talk very long. We see a little bit of a doji or some, small candlesticks develop into the, into the next, the first part of the week. Maybe there might be something here I'd be interested in. Definitely some selling here today, though. And that's, not for tomorrow. I'm not ever going to be buying off of a candle that looks like that. We did close below the 9. You could, say that is a little bit of a short-term bearish signal, and I would agree with you. Do I think it's a tradable bearish signal? No, I do not think that it is, at least in and of its by itself. It's not, I don't think. But I think we have a little reason to believe that maybe there is a little bit of a pullback, in the works here in crude. And maybe, we just got tired of fighting the same level of resistance. We fought it, basically all last week, right? Except for, for the second half of last week. So eventually we either break or give up. I mean, that's what happens at resistance, right? And crude is no exception to that. So I don't think anything has really technically changed over here in crude, at least as of right now. Maybe a pullback opportunity can develop off of this. Well, I guess we'll find out as the week goes by. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is our day in the market. Just kind of one of those days. And for me, the moral of today's story is it's hard to break resistance. And just because we gapped on the open into it doesn't mean it should have broke. And so profit taking, and that's in my mind all that this was. I don't think there's any signals to say that this is the end. It may end up being that. We may generate those signals in the days to come, but I don't think you can say that they really generated here today. With all that said, I mean, that is some overhead resistance. We've been watching it along the way, and not just here. We've been talking about it everywhere we see each other, right? So, I do think it's worth respecting those levels of resistance. I would love to see it just break right through because I think that would be the most beneficial to the most people with the price action that we've seen throughout the course of the year in the market. But I do expect that to be a little bit of a fight for us. And at least today it was. And at least for today, we were not able to beat resistance. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do the market recap for today. But as always, it is always great to see you guys. And thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining me. This is always more fun to do with friends. So if you are new around here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. And be sure to join us on Wednesday. We have our free swing trading webinar on Wednesday evening. Just head on over to tackletrading.com and you can get set up, just pro members or just Team Tackle. Or if you're thinking about being Team Tackle, get over there and join us. Should be a lot of fun. We certainly invite everybody to join us over there. Obviously, we'll have our pro members over there as well. So we'll, of course, see you guys between now and then. So, but if you are new around here, go check it out. Come join us. Come see what it's all about. If you enjoy the market recap, guys, it's always helpful and appreciated if you do give it a thumbs up. The likes, the shares, the comments, they always help. So we certainly appreciate them. I'm always interested in seeing what other traders have to say as well. So if you have anything, if you're catching this a little later in the day, if you have any comments, let us know. Always happy to hear what other people are thinking about the stock market. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, seemed like a quiet day. Seems like it was just kind of one of those subdued days where we gapped on the open and then just not a lot happened and to really change our plans. So it seems like kind of that kind of day, at least to me. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's always great to have you guys, and I will let you get out of here, but we'll pick up same time, same channel here tomorrow afternoon. So have a great Monday night, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.